Dreams, Chapter 1. The Harsh Winter. Winter was by far the worst time of the year in the big industrial city. A bitterly cold wind blew through the city streets. Large snowflakes were whipped by the wind. They fluttered around like tiny white doves, looking for a place to land. Bone-chilling temperatures and heaps of snow made the city of brick and concrete a very unfriendly place. Even the people, bundled up in their heavy overcoats, slipping and sliding on the ice, crackling on the crisp snow, or tramping through slush in their sturdy boots, became even less friendly during the hostile winter months. It seemed as though they took on the personality of winter. But it wasn't just winter that made living in the city difficult. Conditions were bad in the big industrial cities in the early 1900s. The air was dirty, smelly, and polluted. There weren't enough parks or open spaces, and there were always crowds of people scurrying around like ants, eager to build new nests. Sky space was scarce. You were lucky to grab a glimpse of the daytime sun or the evening stars. Amber Little arrived in such a city with her parents and twin brothers a decade after the turn of the 20th century. Her parents had saved their money, hoping eventually to leave their small tropical island home. In fact, it was very good. The temperatures were warm, the sun shone most of the time, and a fresh sea breeze always blew over the island. But making a living off the sea by catching and selling fish had lost its appeal for Amber's father, Lonnie Little. He had done it for over 15 years, and now he was tired of it. He was sick of hauling fish into his boat and listening to them flap around. He was sick of cleaning fish. He was definitely sick of the smell of fish. He really didn't even like eating fish anymore. Lonnie Little wanted a different life in a land of opportunity. He knew that he could do many different kinds of jobs. He had always been a practical man, a man other people came to if they needed something built or fixed. However, over the years, he had begun to dream. Lonnie's dream was to become a baker. The island did not have a bakery, but Lonnie learned to bake from a ship's cook who visited on a supply ship. Lonnie's specialty was muffins. He used the tropical fruits that were so plentiful on their island to bake batches of pineapple, mango, and coconut muffins for his family and friends. One day, people in the big city will eat my tropical muffins and feel as though they live in a world of sunshine, he told his wife, smiling at the very thought of his customers' pleasure. So Ronnie and his wife Rena worked hard to save their money. Then, one day, they gathered the family together and said, "The time to begin living our dream has come. We are going to travel by boat to the big country of Farland. It lies to the north of here. It is the land of opportunity. The money we have saved should be enough to open a bakery. We will be happier than ever before. In 2 weeks, we will leave. So pack your things and get ready for an exciting adventure. Although Lonnie and Rena were filled with optimism about the future, their children were not so sure. However, out of respect for their parents, they would never admit their doubts. Even though Rena shared her husband's dream, she worried about making herself understood in a new language. How would she purchase food for her family if she could not ask for it? She was also nervous about the change in lifestyle. She had lived in a village all her life. The villagers were her friends as well as her extended family. Who would she chat with about the exploits of her children when she was far away? How would she keep in touch with what her sisters, brothers, cousins, nephews, nieces, aunts, and uncles were doing? Amber was also nervous about making new friends in a faraway land. She didn't want to be different from the other children, but she knew she probably would be. To begin with, her skin would be a different shade, and her features would be different. Then there were her clothes. Her father had already told them that it would be very cold in the winter. Amber simply didn't know what cold was and couldn't imagine how she might dress to avoid it. She decided just to pack all of her clothes and hope for the best. Amber knew that there was a limit to what she could take because there wouldn't be much room on the boat. The children had all been told that, apart from their clothes, they could take only 3 things. This was a dilemma for Amber. She had many treasures. There was a shell that sounded like waves breaking on the shore when she put it to her ear. Should she take the shell to remind her of the island? After all, her father had told her that the new city was on a river and not very close to the ocean. Maybe she would never hear the soothing sound of the waves again. Or should she take the piece of driftwood that looked like a turtle? She had found it the day after the biggest storm she had ever experienced. The wind and rain had raged for 3 days. When the storm finally died down, the beach was littered with debris. Sorting through it, Amber had found the piece of wood. It had looked so much like a turtle that at first she had thought it was real. So she'd taken the wood home and left it to dry in the sun. Now, whenever she looked at it, Amber thought of the difference between the storm and the calm. Will there be storms in the big city? She wondered to herself. Then there was Mickey. Mickey was a stuffed monkey her aunt made for her when she was 2 years old. She had carried that monkey around almost her entire life. There was no way she would leave the island without Mickey. That made 3 treasures that were very dear to Amber. And then there were her books. Amber couldn't decide which 3 things she wanted to take with her, so she tried to convince her mother to let her take more. Surprisingly, her mother agreed. But there was a catch. Her choices had to be books. Rena had always told her children that reading was the key to future happiness. She had read to them since they were little, and her motto was, "You must read to succeed." When they were old enough, she encouraged her children to read every single day. So she agreed that if Amber chose books over everything else, she could take 3 books for each of her choices. Since Amber loved books and loved to read, she was happy with her mother's offer. But she knew she would still have to make a decision. After much soul searching, she decided that she could not leave without Mickey. That left 2 more choices. She could take 2 other things or 6 books. In the end, she chose 6 of the books she liked to read the most. Finally, the day to leave the island came. All the Littles' friends and family gathered at the dock to say goodbye. There were sisters and brothers, aunts and uncles, and dozens of cousins and friends. "Write us letters and tell us about the land of opportunity," their friends and family shouted as the Littles boarded the boat. A big lump grew in Amber's throat, and salty tears slid silently down her cheeks and dripped from her chin onto the deck. Then she felt a warm, comforting arm around her and looked up to see her own tearful face reflected in her mother's. "It'll be all right. Just you wait and see," her mother said bravely, drawing Amber closer. Chapter 2. Sailing to Farland. The voyage across the ocean was rough. Strong winds stirred the sea into a frenzy of churning waves. Waves as tall as houses lifted the boat and set it back down. The rising and falling of the boat made almost everybody aboard sick, but not Amber. She had a cast iron stomach. There was no way a little rocking and rolling of the boat was going to make her sick. In fact, unlike most people aboard, Amber rather enjoyed being tossed and turned on the vast sea. After 20 days at sea, the boat finally reached Farland. It was different from anything Amber had known. On the island, her eyes were always drawn to the wide, flat horizon. In the city, Amber found herself with her head back, staring up at the tall buildings that surrounded her. The buildings were different, the roads were different, the people were different, and the noises were different. It was all so confusing that Amber felt permanently dizzy. The first thing Lonnie did was take his family to a small hotel in a run-down part of town and settle them in. Then he set out to search for a bakery and a permanent place for the family to live. "I'm not going to like it here," Amber confided in her mother when her father had gone. "It'll be fine," reassured her mother. "Just give your father time to find us a place to call home." Certainly, Amber was already tired of sleeping in a crowded room and eating food purchased from street vendors. She longed for one of her mother's fine home-cooked meals. She wanted to sit around a table and eat together as a family once again. It took a couple of weeks, but Lonnie finally found a small bakery on a bustling street that was for sale. It was a superb location for a bakery. As luck would have it, There were rooms above the bakery that the family could rent to live in. It was all working out so perfectly that Amber suddenly became very excited about the new life they were starting in the city. The family busied themselves fixing up the bakery. They cleaned it from top to bottom until it was spotless. They scrubbed the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. They scrubbed the ovens, the refrigerator, and the countertops. Lonnie decided that they needed a way to display their muffins, so he bought tools and built glass cases. Finally, they explored the city looking for the best places to buy their supplies. They bought flour, sugar, eggs, and milk. They also bought fruit so that Lonnie could make his tropical muffins. They managed to find pineapples and coconuts, but no mangoes. Instead, they had to buy dried fruit. After a little experimentation, the new version of the tropical sunshine muffins tasted even better than before. In less than 3 weeks, everything was in place, and the Littles were ready to open their bakery. The glass display cases were bursting with all kinds of muffins. The air inside the bakery was filled with the rich, tropical smell of the exotic muffins. The aroma drifted out the door and onto the street. It tweaked the noses of people passing by. Like a magnet, it drew them into the bakery. Business was great. Just as Lonnie had predicted, everyone who entered the store was smiling. They smiled as they looked at the bright floral fabrics from the family's island home that were hanging on the walls of the bakery. They smiled as they looked at the muffins on display. They smiled as they chose what they wanted. And they smiled even more when they left with bags full of delicious muffins. Business was so good that Amber's parents were always working. They had to stay up late mixing the next day's supply of muffin batter. Then they baked muffins very early in the morning. Amber had started school by now. But when she wasn't studying, she helped her parents. At night, she stirred the muffin batter, and after school, she worked behind the counter. Amber began to enjoy her new life in Farland. Amber was a voracious reader, and her parents bought her many new books. She read at night as she stirred the batter. Once in bed, she read until she fell asleep. She even read behind the counter when she was not helping a customer. The Littles were happy living in the biggest city in the land of opportunity. But their happiness did not last long. Before winter had even begun, an influenza epidemic hit Farland, and Amber's mother became very ill. Very quickly, she became so ill that she could not even get out of bed. In addition to helping in the bakery, Amber now had to care for her younger brothers. There was no time for school and no time for play. Lonnie worked hard keeping the business going, and Amber helped him whenever she could. Amber's mother became so sick that there was little hope that she would live. There was no cure for influenza, and 9 months and 3 days after arriving in Farland, Amber's mother died. Everyone was devastated. Although Lonnie was very sad after the death of his wife, he worked around the clock to keep the bakery open. Even though the customers were very happy, Lonnie seldom wore a smile. He just worked and worked. The more he worked, the more worn down he became from lack of sleep. The more worn down he became, the more he thought back to the pleasant life they had all enjoyed on the tropical island. Just 6 weeks after the death of Amber's mother, her father became ill. Hard work and lack of sleep had weakened him, and he caught influenza. Thousands of people were dying as the deadly disease swept through the city. Amber spent all her time caring for her sick father and her brothers. She cooked, washed clothes, and cleaned. She had no time to tend to the bakery, so she hung a sign on the door that said, "Closed due to illness." The family had been living off the money they had saved, but their funds were running dangerously low. Never had Amber felt so helpless. She did all she could to make her father feel comfortable, but she was afraid that he too would die. She was right. Within the month, influenza had claimed him. Amber and her 2 brothers were now alone in the world. They would have to fend for themselves. Chapter 3. Alone in the City. Now a broken-hearted Amber was left to care for her twin brothers. The bakery had been closed for a month, and all their savings were gone. The rent had to be paid, and she had to feed herself and her brothers. Amber knew that if they were to survive, she would need to reopen the bakery. There was just enough money left for her to purchase the ingredients for 1 day's supply of muffins. So Amber put aside her sorrow and got to work. Amber's brothers were only 10 years old, but she quickly taught them how to bake muffins. She also taught them how to count money so they could work behind the counter. Amber proved to be a good teacher. Soon, her brothers were helping her bake some of the best muffins imaginable. They had a secret ingredient that they never used before. It was coffee. They mixed it with chocolate. And while no one knew exactly what made the new muffins so delicious, people were soon flocking to the bakery to buy them. Without fail, once customers bought their first mocha muffins, they came back for more. Even though business was building up again, Amber couldn't relax. Influenza crept through the city, taking more and more lives. Amber worried that she might get the disease. If she got sick, who would care for the boys? For a 14-year-old, Amber was wise in many ways. Still, she was only 14, and the responsibility of running a bakery and caring for 2 younger brothers was a lot to ask of anyone. At night, as she cleaned the muffin pans, Amber would think about her island home. She thought about her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, and her friends. In her heart, she knew she wanted to go back. However, Amber also knew that she couldn't save enough money to get her and her brothers on a boat back to their island home. All the money they made at the bakery was used to buy more ingredients and supplies and to pay the rent. There was hardly enough left over for their own food and clothing. They didn't even have enough money to pay for coal or gas to heat the rooms they lived in. As the weather got colder, so did Amber and her brothers. Some evenings, they stayed in the bakery kitchen for hours as the ovens cooled down, rather than go up to their cold apartment. On other evenings, Amber closed the bakery at 4 o'clock, and the three of them walked along the nearby railroad tracks in search of coal dropped by passing freight trains. At least a few lumps of coal for the fire took the chill out of the air. For Amber and her brothers, the winter seemed to last forever. Although she felt lucky that they had escaped the death grip of influenza, Amber worried all the time. She was afraid that there was still a chance that they would all become ill. The colder it became, the more Amber dreamed of getting back to the warmth and security of the island. She began to share her dream with a kind old woman who had visited the bakery every day since Amber had reopened it. Her name was Jackie, and Amber thought she must be well into her 80s. No matter what, Jackie always had a big smile stretched across her wrinkled face. As weeks went by, the bond between the old woman and the young girl grew. Amber was like the great-granddaughter Jackie didn't have, and Jackie was the only parent figure left to Amber. Like so many other people living in the city at the time, Jackie was struggling to get by. Occasionally, she would make soup out of all the vegetables she could find and share it with Amber and her brothers. In return, Amber would give her free muffins. When she could, Jackie brought them any coal she could spare. She wished she could do more to help, and the more Amber talked about her dream of returning home, the more determined Jackie became to help her find a way. Chapter 4. Jackie's Plan. One day, Jackie's smile was even bigger than usual as she entered the bakery. Amber couldn't imagine why. The weather was terrible. It was snowing in huge white drifts, and the cold wind blew in through every crack it could find. Jackie stomped the snow off her worn black boots, dusted snowflakes from her overcoat, and greeted Amber with her usual, "Good day, my muffin princess." "How can you be so happy on such a miserable day?" asked Amber. "We're survivors, you and I. Every day that we wake up in this harsh city is a good day," said Jackie with a glint in her eye. "Besides, wait until you hear what I have to say. I think it's going to make you mighty happy, too." "The only thing that would make me happy right now would be warm temperatures and sunshine," replied Amber. "I'm so sick of this ugly winter weather. It just goes on and on." "Then listen carefully to what I have to say, my pretty muffin princess," said Jackie mysteriously. "I have a plan that will get you and your brothers back to your tropical island home. Listen to this. I've learned from a friend that a boat moored down on the river will soon set sail for your homeland." "Well, that's all fine and dandy," replied Amber, "but you know I have no money to buy tickets for me and my brothers." You know I have no chance of ever saving enough money to make my dream come true. It's a dream, Jackie, just a dream. So, how is a boat heading for the island going to help my brothers and me? Be patient and listen, replied Jackie with a mischievous smile. I told you I had a plan. Now just sit still and hear what I have to say. She went on to explain that she had a friend named Cookie who had been hired as the chief cook on the boat bound for Amber's home. Jackie told Amber that Cookie needed an assistant and that he had agreed to hire Amber. She explained that since Amber was an experienced muffin maker, she would make an excellent cook's assistant aboard the boat. But they don't hire females as crew members on boats, said Amber, remembering things she had read in books. And they especially won't hire a 14-year-old female. You're so right, Amber, continued Jackie agreeably. But that is a small problem for which I've already thought of a solution. I suppose you want me to dress up as a man, said Amber jokingly. Yes, that's exactly what I want you to do, replied Jackie. See, great minds think alike. Then what? Asked Amber, imagining how Jackie's plan could work and beginning to feel more hopeful about their chances of escaping the city. Cookie has agreed to help keep the secret, replied Jackie. All we need to do is cut your hair and find some clothes for you to wear. As Jackie's plan began to sink in, Amber's mind raced. The more she thought about it, the more risks and problems she could see. But then she thought of escaping from the cold winter and the threat of influenza. She thought about being with friends and family once again. Eventually, she convinced herself that the plan was worth the risk. She figured the very worst that could happen was that they would get caught and have to return to the city. However, there was one more huge issue. She looked at Jackie and said, "What about the twins? I can't go without them. So how do I get them on the boat?" "Not to worry," replied Jackie. "Cookie and I have a plan for them, too." Jackie went on to explain that there were large wooden crates sitting on the dock, waiting to be loaded onto the boat. "The plan is," she said, "to sneak onto the dock in the dark of night and hide the twins in an extra crate marked miscellaneous food supplies. The morning of the day the boat sets sail, the crew will load the crates onto the boat and take the food supply crates to the galley area. Then you and Cookie will open the crates, unpack the food, and hide the twins in Cookie's cabin. They can stay there until the boat reaches the island. It will be important to keep the twins out of sight from the captain and other crew members. Since you are helping in the galley, you will be able to sneak food to them. They will be stowaways on the boat bound for the islands. It will be an adventure none of you will ever forget." "You're right about that," answered Amber. "When does the boat leave?" "Next Tuesday, about noon," replied Jackie. So once again, Amber had to pack up and leave her home. Only this time, she had no decisions to make. Her brothers were to be stowaways, so they could take nothing with them. She needed to travel lightly, so she gave all her books to Jackie, and that left only Mickey to carry. Fortunately, they wouldn't need to take all their winter clothes with them. For the next few days, Amber was so caught up in the excitement of leaving that she didn't even think about the freezing cold temperatures and the raw wind blowing down the streets. Instead, she thought of the island's warm sun and the feeling of warm sand between her toes. It made her smile. She sat down and wrote a letter to her aunt and uncle, telling them of Jackie's plan. She gave them the boat's name and their expected arrival time. She told them that she and the twins would have to wait until nightfall to leave the boat in order to avoid being caught. It felt so good to be finally going home. She hoped within her heart of hearts that the tropical island was as she remembered it. Chapter 5. Preparing to sail away. The week passed quickly, and soon it was the day before they were to leave. Jackie cut Amber's hair for her and brought her some trousers and a shirt to wear. Amber used up the last of the ingredients to make a final batch of tropical sunshine muffins. She had a small amount of money left over after settling up the rent, so she gave it to Jackie. Then she and Jackie sat down and talked, killing time until dark, when Cookie would come to get them. At the appointed time, Cookie arrived at the bakery. Amber, Jackie, and the twins were ready, all dressed in black so that they wouldn't be spotted. They quietly made their way down to the river. Cookie quickly led them through the silent night to a maze of wooden crates marked miscellaneous food supplies that were stacked up, waiting to be loaded onto the boat. "This is the empty one," he whispered, pointing to a crate on the ground. "This is the one that the twins need to hide in." Cookie quietly pried open the lid of the large wooden crate. "Now you need to curl up together and go to sleep," Amber said to her brothers, knowing that it would be really hard for them to do that. From his bag, Cookie produced 2 warm blankets. Amber gave each of the boys 2 muffins and some water. "Now remember," Jackie said to the twins, "not a word unless you hear 3 knocks on the crate. You've got to be as quiet as possible. If anyone finds you, there will be no trip home for you. Do you understand?" The twins nodded silently. They were frightened, but they understood what they had to do. Amber gave her brothers a hug and told them she would see them in the morning. "Be brave and be quiet," she said, as Cookie closed the lid and nailed it tight with a hammer that he had wrapped in a blanket to muffle the noise. "I'll see you tomorrow aboard the boat. That's only a few hours away now." That night, Amber tossed and turned in her bed. She was concerned about her brothers and couldn't help wondering how they were. She was also filled with excitement about leaving. Butterflies danced in her stomach all night long. Eventually, morning came, and shortly after sunrise, Jackie was knocking on the bakery door. "This is your big day, Muffin Princess," she said. But for the first time that Amber could remember, Jackie wasn't wearing the wonderful smile that usually lit up her face. "What's wrong?" Amber asked. "Nothing's wrong," Jackie replied. "I guess I'm just sad to be losing such a good friend." "Oh, but you're not losing a friend," said Amber. "You will always be my very dear, sweet friend. I'll miss you, but you'll always be in my thoughts and in my heart. You are the kindest, most generous person I have ever known. I will never, ever forget you." With that, Amber wrapped her arms around Jackie and gave her the biggest hug she could. They both wiped away a few tears. "Well, my muffin princess," said Jackie, "you'd better get ready. We have to get down to the river to meet Cookie. He will be waiting for us." When Amber got dressed and walked out of her room, Jackie laughed. "You don't look like a princess now," she said. "I guess I'll have to call you my muffin prince." Chapter 6. Time to Sail. Amber and Jackie stepped out into the cold morning air, and Amber shut the door of the bakery for the last time. As she did, she shut the door on the sad memories of her parents' deaths. She shut the door on the sweet smell of muffins and on the months of hard work. Then she and Jackie crunched through the snow to the river where Cookie would meet them. "Well, Amber," remarked Cookie when they got to the river, "I think you'll pull it off. If I didn't know better, I would have said you were a young man. From now on, I'm going to call you Andy." The three of them headed for the boat to watch as the last of the crates were loaded. The twins' crate, marked miscellaneous food supplies, was still on the dock. Cookie looked around to make sure there was no one nearby. Then he knocked gently 3 times and said, "Is everything all right in there?" "Yes, we're fine," came back the whispered reply. "Stay quiet, then," instructed Cookie. "They'll be loading your crate very soon. Once you're down in the galley, we'll get you out. Remember, don't say anything until you hear 3 knocks on the side of the crate." For the next 2 hours, the dock was a hive of activity as the crew loaded all the supplies on board and got the boat ready to sail. Cookie was giving orders about where to put the food crates when disaster struck. As some of the crew were hoisting the miscellaneous food supplies crate with the twins in it onto the boat, the rope slipped and the crate crashed to the deck. Amber's heart sank, and she held her breath. She listened to hear if the twins were crying out. She heard nothing. Amber looked at Jackie. She looked as horrified as Amber felt. "No damage on the outside," yelled Cookie to the crew members. "Just get this crate to the galley area as quickly as you can. I'll take over from there and make sure there's no damage to the supplies. Come on, get moving." The crew members rushed to the crate and moved it to the galley, thankful not to be punished for their carelessness. Amber turned to Jackie, fighting back the tears. "They could be dead," she whispered. "They'll be fine," Jackie said, reminding her of her mother's words all that time ago when they had first left their island home. "Come on, Andy," called Cookie. "I can only give you a little hug now that I'm a boy," said Amber to Jackie. "But I can give you a big hug," replied Jackie, and she did just that. Amber walked up the gangway and onto the boat. Within the hour, the gangway was lifted and the boat set sail. Down in the galley, Cookie hurriedly opened the crate. "Thank goodness you're safe," said Amber, relieved as the 2 grinning faces peered out at her. "Are you two okay?" Cookie asked. "We had a good bump, but no broken bones," one of the twins replied. "What happened?" "Oh, someone just dropped the crate, that's all," replied Amber. "It's a good thing it didn't break open. I don't even want to think of what would have happened if you had spilled out onto the deck." "Come on now," said Cookie. "Let's get you hidden in my cabin while everyone else is busy getting this boat on its way out to sea." "I still can't believe that in 20 days we'll be back home again with our friends and family," sighed Amber as she followed Cookie and the boys. The trip back to the island seemed much smoother than the trip Amber remembered from 2 years ago. Now there was just gentle trade winds rather than the strong winds that had stirred the sea into a frenzy of churning waves on the way over. The ocean was flat, and hardly any of the passengers were seasick. Everyone took a liking to Andy. They especially liked the sweet muffins he prepared for their breakfast each day. The twins stayed safely hidden in Cookie's cabin, playing games and reading his collection of comic books. Excitement mounted as the days passed. Soon land was in sight, and Amber rushed below to tell her brothers. "We'll be home today," she said excitedly. "We'll have to wait until dark before we leave the boat. We can't afford to be caught now." That night, while the crew was out celebrating their arrival, Cookie, Amber, and the boys quietly left the boat to await the arrival of their aunt and uncle. "Goodbye, Amber," said Cookie as he set off to join the other crew members. "I'll see you each time the boat docks here, and I'll bring you news of Jackie." The first thing Amber did after he left was to take off her shoes. The next thing she did was look to the north. She smiled and thought about Jackie, who had made it possible for them to return to the island. And she whispered to herself, "Thank you, my kind and gentle friend." Chapter 7. Home Again. At first, Amber was very happy to be back on the island. All of her aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and friends gathered around Amber and her brothers like a protective cloak, trying to keep out all the bad memories of Farland and the influenza epidemic. The homecoming celebrations lasted for many days, with laughter, singing, and feasting. The twins were so happy to be home that they didn't even want to sleep. They spent their time running around the island, swimming, fishing, eating, and laughing with the island children. It was as if they wanted to forget that they had ever been away. But for Amber, it was different. She couldn't help thinking about her father and mother and their dream of a better life. The family had sailed into the unknown, and Lonnie's dream of a life in the land of prosperity had turned into a nightmare. Yet when Amber looked back on her life in Farland, she remembered some of the wonderful things too. She remembered how good they had all felt when the bakery opened and people flocked in to buy the tropical sunshine muffins. She remembered her own sense of achievement when she reopened the bakery and began to make money from the muffins. Most of all, Amber remembered Jackie and how kind she'd been. People on the island always helped each other, but in the city, it had taken a special person to reach out to Amber and her brothers. Amber looked around at the beauty of her island. The sun was shining, and all around she could hear laughter and singing. Jackie would love this, she thought to herself. She could come and live out her days here. She struggled in the city long enough. Next time Cookie's boat docks here, I'll send a message to Jackie, telling her to come and visit me. Amber wrote a letter for Cookie to deliver to Jackie. After it finally reached her, Jackie carried it around in her purse. On some days, when the weather was bad, she would sit on a bench in the park, read the letter over and over, and dream about life on Amber's Island. After a few weeks, Jackie wrote back to Amber, saying that she would never forget Amber and her brothers, but that she would not be coming to the island. She had lived in the city her whole life. It was big and busy, and life there was often harsh. But the city was her home. Jackie knew she would never leave it. And Amber, now back home, understood. The end.